that was a moment of just disbelief for me, like that this is the best that we can do. Something that can't touch the human skin, but we're pumping it directly into a child's heart, knowing it's going to cause damage. Like we've got to be better than that.
Welcome to What We Leave Behind, a podcast produced by the Hale Foundation, where we highlight leaders in South Florida who are making an impact. Today's guest is someone whose story is rooted in both heartbreak and hope. Oscar Ortiz is the father of Sebastian Ortiz and the founder of the Sebastian Strong Foundation, an organization born from a promise that he made to his son during an unimaginably difficult time. After Sebastian was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive pediatric cancer, Oscar and his family committed themselves to fighting for a future where better, less toxic treatments exist for children. Since then, Oscar has turned personal tragedy into powerful advocacy, raising over $4 million to support cutting-edge pediatric cancer research. He's a tireless voice for change, a partner in the Dolphins Cancer Challenge initiative, and above all, a father honoring his son's incredible legacy. Oscar, welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
It's really amazing to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to diving into your story and the impact that you are having on South Florida.
Thank you.
So to start off, I'd love to talk about, can you take us from the beginning? What was your son, Sebastian, like as a person?
We love all our children. I have two other boys. They're all special and unique in their own way. Sebastian was, I often said, kind of the best of all of us. And one of the ways I explain that to people is Sebastian, at his age, at 15, 16, when he passed, he was the kind that can be in a room with toddlers and kind of lead an activity. Then, obviously, he was very comfortable amongst his peers, but then would hang out with me and my friends, which some would argue would sometimes be more like teenagers. And then at the same time at family gatherings at Thanksgiving and Christmas or Noche Buena, he'd hold court with that generation. And it wasn't common for kids like that to do that. He was just really comfortable with his own skin and was a funny kid. I really appreciated his sense of humor.
And your family they reside in Miami, Florida?
Yeah, we're born and raised in Miami Springs, a little neighborhood. I've lived in two houses in my life, so our families are very close. My parents live a mile and a half away. My youngest brother lives a little over a mile away. So we all grew up in this tight community that the boys went to the same grade school I went to, Blessed Trinity, went to the same high school, Christopher Columbus. So they really followed similar paths.
And when was Sebastian diagnosed?
October of 2015. We're coming upon 10 years. He was a cross-country runner in high school, a sophomore, and felt a mass. It was in his scrotum. He feels a mass, and he says, "Hey, I feel something weird. Does it hurt?" And, he tells us, thankfully, "Does it hurt? No. All right. Let's watch it and see what happens." And about a week and a half later, he came back and said, I think it's gotten bigger. And that was obviously an alarm for us. So my wife said, "Can you take him?" Sets an appointment for a Monday night. I'll never forget it. Monday night to go to the pediatrician. Traffic is brutal in Miami. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, let's just go to dinner and tell Mom we went. We obviously didn't do that. But we went to the pediatrician and he said, "Look, I don't like this." Next morning, you need to go to Nicolas Children's Hospital is where he tells us to go. So I still, you're in disbelief throughout all this, and you just think he was hit, a hernia. You're not thinking cancer. But the next morning, we had several moments that happened. And the first was that next morning at 7:30 in the morning, the pediatrician called us and says, "Hey, just want to make sure you're going to see the urologist at Nicolas Children's Hospital." And that was an moment. Like, why are you calling me? I told you we were going to go. "No, just in case." I'm like, this is more serious. So got to the hospital, ran through a battery of tests that day, including ultrasounds, and that showed that this was a very active site. And the recommendation was to surgically remove one of his testicles in the spermatic cord. That's kind of the area that was impacted. because they couldn't give us a formal biopsy result until that Friday. But they said, no matter what this is, whether it's malignant or not, it needs to come out. And so kind of had a conversation with Sebs and said, hey, you're part of this. This is not they're taking a biopsy of skin off your, like, this is a more serious. And he said, Dad, whatever we need to do. And talked to my primary care physician. He said, look, timing is important. So had surgery that same day. And then the next day he showed up at his cross country meet. He couldn't run, but he showed up at his cross country meet to support his teammates. So that's an indication of who he is. The next steps in the process were really where you start to become a little discouraged. There's a lot of disbelief because we're at Nicolas Children. They tell us there's only one treatment protocol and it's over 40 years old, highly toxic. So then I said, we're going to get a second opinion. And they said, look, we welcome a second opinion, but don't take a month travel around the country to figure this out because they're going to tell you the same thing. But in my head, I thought, surely with all the advances we see, that there would be something. It would be something. So we went to Sylvester, and they came back and they tell us, well, this is the only treatment option. They basically repeat to us what Nicolas did. And I, being born and raised in Miami, I thought, this is a Miami thing. They just don't know what they're doing. We're the fraud capital. We've got a bunch of unique titles that we've earned through the years. So I thought, I'm going to check with other institutions. This doesn't sound right. So I had phone consultations with Sloan Kettering, with MD Anderson and St. Jude, and they all said, that's all there is. And St. Jude actually said, he's not we don't have a clinical trial in that space, so he wouldn't even qualify to come here. And the other two said, we're going to do the same thing. So in certain respects, it made things easier because it's sad, but we didn't have a choice. It was kind of simple. So, we ended up selecting We felt comfortable with the doctors. Nicolas was great, but one of the things that helped push us to go to is they also have an adult oncology group, and Sebastian being 15 going on 16, we felt we'd get a more comprehensive perspective. So we started. It was 6 months of hard chemo. That Sebastian was 6 feet tall, 145 pounds, 140 pounds. At the end of 6 months, he weighed 110 pounds. The chemo is brutal. And he had a couple of significant surgeries throughout that. We were supposed to be done. His last chemotherapy ended up being what we thought would be his last chemotherapy was his 16th birthday. So we came home, we celebrated. And then probably a week later, there was we got a call that there's just an area that they can't completely rule out. So we went ahead and had PET scans and CT scans, and nothing would light up in a significant. It wasn't a large tumor, but there was this thickening in this area called the omentum in his abdomen, and because this cancer kind of spreads like a rash, and it while it's being treated, it can keep it at bay. It won't build the large mass, but they said, look, let's just, even though it's not showing up in any of these scans, let's go in and do a biopsy. It's a fairly quick process. And when they went in to do the biopsy, they found disease in his abdomen, and that changed the course of everything, because at this point it was no longer localized disease. And now we were going to be playing whack-a-mole. The cancer was in an area you can't remove, so we regrouped after a couple of days. It was an extremely difficult few days because up until then I had not considered the possibility of losing Sebastian. Hadn't entered my head. So that was the first time that I thought, oh, it's real. This is really, really bad. So we regathered ourselves with him kind of leading the charge and said, okay, this is what it is. What do we have to do? And so there was heavier chemo with a large surgery in November. So we regrouped and went back went back after it. It was a lot. He got down to, close to under 100 pounds, just brutal. Physically much more challenging. Some of the chemos would be 5-night stays. As a matter of fact, to give you an idea on the toxicity of these chemotherapies. There's one drug called doxorubicin. Its nickname is the Red Devil. They had to do an ultrasound of his heart because they know it causes a deterioration of cardiac function every time it's administered. And it's administered in smaller doses over 5 nights so they can kind of flush it out. One of the nights in the hospital, because we are stereotypically Hispanic, we had 9 or 10 people in the room, and my father-in-law accidentally caught his arm on the central line, and so it popped out. The port didn't pop out, but the line popped out, and it spilled all over the floor. It looks like Gatorade. Mm-hmm. And when that happened, we obviously have to tell the nurses. So the nurses basically clear the room, and they have to come in with effectively hazmat suits, because the very thing you're pumping directly into my child's heart can't touch your skin. So that was a moment of just disbelief for me, like that this is the best that we can do. Something that can't touch the human skin, but we're pumping it directly into a child's heart, knowing it's going to cause damage. Like we've got to be better than that. So he finished that treatment. We had a special moment, bought him his kind of dream car. I have video of, I'll show you that after this. But, and then he had this one big surgery that was left. It's called a high-pec surgery. It's effectively contact chemo. They open you up and flush the chemo through your abdomen for an hour and a half, and it's brutal. In hopes that would catch the stuff that kind of got loose. Mm-hmm. But this is in November of 16, when the surgeon came out, just kind of right after starting the surgery. You could see in his face, we had family there, but he pulls Rose and I aside. You could see in his face that he said, "It's everywhere." And we kind of, at that point, there was a little bit of negotiating in my head, like, all right, is there stuff we can remove? You're like, it was just a function of having a G tube or something along those lines. You're desperate. And he said, no, this is everywhere. It's not fixable. So, finished up the surgery, and then the recovery was brutal. So for probably 3 or 4 weeks, we were in the hospital, probably 10 or 11 days in ICU of him recovering. And then all during that time trying to figure out what our other options are, talking to the doctors, talking to other hospitals. Are there any trials that have come up? Or is there anything that's out there that we can try? And coming up empty. So after a month in the hospital, right before we were released, had a meeting with his leadership, with the medical leadership team, and they basically said there were no more curative options, that we can continue to administer chemotherapy, but it would mean more time in the hospital, and that he would not be cured, that this would not lead to long-term survival. I didn't know if it would be a month, 3 months. So then I had to tell him, which as people look back and they ask you what's the most challenging moment you can remember, and it was having to tell him that I couldn't help him anymore. My job throughout was to be the cheerleader and tell him everything was going to be okay and do all the things that I can do so there was a sense of failure, and I'll never forget, I said, "Sebs, I'm so sorry we don't have anything else." He said, "For real?" I said, "For real?" And we gathered ourselves. It was my wife, myself, and him. And he says, within minutes, it's part of what drives me at every moment. He goes, "Okay, we're gonna go home and wait for a miracle." It was just positive. And then the other condition he put in place was, I get to tell everybody, you don't, and obviously, yes. And so I watched him, bring in the nurses, bring in obviously medical staff, but my parents, my in-laws, his brothers, his cousins, and I'll tell them and watch him console them as he tells them that he's going to die. It's still it's my source of fuel every day. Like when people tell you things are hard, or we think about how we react under pressure or challenges. This is a 16-year-old handling mortality with a grace that I, to that point, had never seen. And as much as it hurt, there was an element of just great pride. And that's, I hope, some of what he learned from us and his family, but so beautiful. So we came home and was at home for almost 2.5 weeks with hospice care at home and passed away on December 29th of 2016. I knew from the moment that the surgeon said that that it's everywhere. I started to prep myself as much as one can. Not, you can't really prepare for your child dying. There's no prep course. But I started writing things down. I started journaling and things that I want to make sure that I don't forget in these moments, because I know my emotions are continually going to be more challenged. And within that was, just how unjust this is, not just for him, but it's for other kids too. Because while I was hyper focused on Sebastian, the reality is we meet other families who are going through this, and you're like, this is not uncommon, unfortunately. So I know I wanted to do something. I didn't know what it was, and above all, to honor him. That was the purpose of it. I wanted to honor Sebastian, so that people don't forget him. There's a saying out there, I don't know who to credit it to, but it's not mine. And it is that, we die not the day that we stop breathing. We die the day that people stop speaking of us. Mm-hmm. And that was part of my reason for the foundation as well. I will always share Sebastian. I will keep him alive, through his stories and through the work that we do. I didn't really know what we were going to do. I just knew I needed to do something. And, after a year, I think we raised a little over $300,000.
Wow. In 1 year. In
the first year. And while we were proud of that, a lot of that was, and I don't say this sarcastically or cynically, it was pity money. It was a lot of money from people who, this is horrible, I can't fix it, so I'm not going to write a check. And we're grateful for it. I take pity money now as well. I'm not, anybody who wants to support what we're trying to do, I'm grateful for. But I recognized that's what it was. And we're like, oh, now I need to do something with this. And the one thing, and there are a lot of gaps in the childhood cancer space there in terms of care. Because it's an incredibly disruptive diagnosis. It's not, as an adult, if I'm diagnosed, I don't need someone with me all the time. Obviously, we need the medical care, but when it's a child, someone needs to stop working to care for the child, assuming you're a 2-parent family, because we would see kids in the hospital by themselves. It's one of the most sad things, because not only is this, their child is seriously ill, but they don't have people around them. And the nurses do a wonderful job, but
it's incredibly expensive too to care for your family while also providing for them medical care. Medical care is outrageously expensive.
And you need insurance, so you can't quit your job if the insurance is the means by which you pay for your child's medical care. So we were fortunate. My wife was able to stop working. I had good insurance. My job gave me incredible flexibility, so I didn't miss any of my son's treatments. Whenever I traveled, it was around his treatments for work, and whenever something went south, which happened a few times, or something unexpectedly has to go back to the hospital, I'd cut my trip short and fly back home. It was all domestic travel, fortunately, but you started to look at all those things. But for us, what we needed above all was research. And we started to dig in and recognize how little money there is in research. Little investment, because you'd think all these advancements we've seen in society across the board, not just in medicine, but technology. And yet this is all we have for kids. And it's because the infrastructure isn't there. When you look at, I always say the three legs of the stool, you have pharma, and this is not a shot at pharma. It's just I'm asking them to be better because we need them. They're an important stakeholder. But there's been over 200 drugs developed specifically for adults with cancer. There's only been 7 developed for kids. It's harder to study kids, so I get that. But that's a crazy number. So most of the drugs being used on children are adult drugs. And children aren't small adults.
Their bodies can't handle that.
Correct. And the long-term implications of these treatments are significant. There's a data point. It's 95% of childhood cancer survivors have some sort of health issue by the time they're in their 40s. And you're talking about serious health issues like secondary cancers. We have a close friend, Jake, who was diagnosed at 8 years old with Ewing sarcoma. 5 years later, he's been diagnosed. He just went through a bone marrow transplant with leukemia. That was treatment induced. It was as a result of, so it's not just that there's a limited amount of medicines or medications or treatments, but it's that they're not effective. So you've got pharma not doing a lot there. You've got foundations, and look, there's a lot of wonderful foundations out there. And St. Jude, we have one of the doctors that sits on our scientific advisory board is from St. Jude. St. Jude is a wonderful organization. They've saved countless lives. The challenge I have with St. Jude, and I've told Dr. Beth Stewart this, who's a friend, I said, the challenge I have is all that wonderful work, but one of the disservices I believe that St. Jude has done is created this perception that they're the Amazon of childhood cancer.
Yes.
Because I can't tell you how many times people ask me, hey, did you go to St. Jude? No, it didn't occur to me. So we've created this perception that you just go to St. Jude.
Yeah, with all of the commercials that they have.
Yeah, and they're great because they create awareness. I don't want to.
Yes.
But it's not an accurate prescription or description of what it is or portrayal of it, because first off, in all those commercials, all the kids are smiling, and that's not.
No.
That's not indicative. If you walk a pediatric oncology floor, you'll hear some screams too. It's not all smiles. And then the other part that I tell people, and this is on their website, they have less than 100 inpatient beds. There are 16,000 kids diagnosed in this country every year. So they simply can't take care of everybody. As wonderful as they are, they can't take care of everybody. And childhood cancer is an incredibly complex disease. Cancer in general is incredibly complex. It takes collaboration. If anybody were that good at it, and this is a societal issue, everyone wants a silver bullet for everything. There is no silver bullet for this. If anybody had a silver bullet, my son would be alive. If St. Jude was that good, or anybody was that good 50 years ago, they'd be. It's an incredibly complex disease, and it's going to take collaborative efforts. So, and then places like the American Cancer Society, who I used to raise money for, and they're not a bad organization either. They've done a lot of great things. But they use a lot of pictures of children in their marketing. And historically, less than 2% of what they raise goes to pediatrics.
Wow.
So when you have circumstances like that, it makes it really difficult. And then the third leg of the stool is the government. And this is not a political statement right now, but the NCI right now, they're facing significant cuts to their funding. The work that's being done by the NCI for childhood cancer, they get approximately $200 million a year is what it's been historically. NCI's had a $5 billion budget, 4% about 4% of that is what goes to kids. Starbucks sells more coffee than that in 3 days. So there isn't enough. And this is a space where, as I shared earlier, pharma isn't going to make a difference. So I share all that in that long-winded ways. It's how we ended up deciding to fund research, because we didn't, at first, I think, what are we going to do with research? And as soon as we started to dig in a little more, we start to recognize that there is such little money in research that these people doing this work rely on smaller foundations like us to serve effectively as seed capital for their ideas. We're not, we fund an idea or a concept that they take to fruition, and then with those results go to the next level to get more money, or sometimes they come back to us for more money. But the idea is to get ideas off the ground that wouldn't get off the ground otherwise. And there are several other foundations like ours. Not as many as I thought originally, because so many of the foundations that are focused on childhood cancer focus on other important areas of service, whether it be family support, whether it be activities, things that are more tangible, which donors connect with more.
Yes, but not the research.
Right, not the research, which isn't sexy. I mean, research takes a long time, and it doesn't lead to this immediate, we found this cure. That's not the way it works. But if we're not doing this now, then we'll be in the same place 40, 60 years from now when others have children. My children have children now. Like what I hope they have better options. And that I'm committed to for the rest of my life.
You have raised an amazing amount of money. How have you seen that money come into fruition? I was watching another podcast that you spoke on, and you said that you had the opportunity to see firsthand and meet the children that you were impacting. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. With research, sometimes it's hard, as I mentioned earlier, to get the tangible, because it's people working in a lab, and these are ideas in their infancy who sometimes won't see a patient for some years. But about a year and a half ago, we funded a brain tumor project. There was a consortium of Children's National in DC, Virginia Tech, and Columbia University, and it's using focused ultrasound to disrupt the blood-brain barrier to be able to get medications through there. And one of the doctors who sits on our scientific advisory board, we were up there getting an update on the research that they funded, kind of telling us what they're doing with it. And one of the doctors says, we have one of the patients who's on that trial up here. Would you like to meet her? And I said, yes. And so I got to see firsthand. It was the first time I get to see firsthand the impact of what we're doing. And to this young girl is facing a deadly disease. It's a brain tumor called DIPG, which is nearly 100% fatal. But she's the normal, at this point, the normal life expectancy is 9 months. She's 22 months out, and which is magnificent with a decent quality of life. But got to see her, and that obviously brought a smile to my face. But then got to talk to Mom a little, and then Mom, and this is not why you do it, but it certainly felt gratifying. As Mom says, "Thank you for what you're doing. I don't know what we'd be doing if we didn't have this." And I couldn't help but think, I wish I would have had that. Mm-hmm. I wish I would have had that for Sebastian. But it was an incredibly rewarding moment, and I want more of those. That's what we've strived for. And some of the other things we do that are kind of meaningful is we have a kayaking event where we kayak from Key Largo to Key West. We just did that in May. And we bring families down with us. This year we had 12 families. A couple we flew in, one from New York, the patients of some of our doctors, one from the DC area. And they come down for the weekend. Most of the time, these are families who are between treatment, but well enough to go. But also families who many times would not be able to have this kind of an experience. So we include the families, including siblings, to get them away for a weekend of just normalcy, and the patients themselves paddle in as we come in on the last mile of our 110-mile journey. The families, a caregiver and one of the children paddle in the last mile with us, and then we get to shore and have a huge party celebrating them, and it's incredibly rewarding to be around those people, and those people become incredible friends through the years. We understand one another because we have this unfortunate shared experience, but it is incredibly rewarding to be able to do stuff like that and to see the fruits of our labor.
Yes, to see it come into fruition and see the impact that it's truly having. And I know that your foundation has had countless has impacted countless lives, not only throughout South Florida, but throughout the entire nation. How do you hope to continue in raising awareness?
In everything I do. I mean, I didn't have a bunch of tattoos prior to, I worked in corporate America.
Yes.
Awareness is the most important part of all this. And in every interaction I have with somebody, it is that, because, unless you're aware there's a problem, no one's looking for a solution. And I think that's been fundamentally, the biggest challenge. And I start very often by telling people, don't feel bad. I had no idea prior to my son being sick. I thought I would call St. Jude. I really did think it was like, oh, all right, we'll go there and it'll get fixed.
Yeah, and they'll magically fix it.
Right. I mean, or that they would have the resources, because they've been telling us for years that, come here and we'll take care of it. Not really appreciating the complexity and severity of what childhood cancer is. I think educating people, and I use this line all the time. I think I bother some of my board members sometimes because I say it all the time. I share, and then I say, now, like what I shared with you a moment ago about the facts about why there's little funding. You got pharma, you got government, you got foundations that, once you know that, you can't unknow it. Now you have a choice. Do you want to support this? Support Sebastian Strong or other wonderful foundations out there that are supporting childhood cancer. I'm biased. I like us, but in the end, there are a lot of philanthropic dollars out there that are dedicated to a ton of worthwhile causes. Some not as worthwhile objectively, but I hope that people do more in the childhood cancer space. Because the other thing I share with people, and I don't say it to scare them, is there's a vulnerability with childhood cancer. I think we often think, I'll go back and say I was living, and I mean this sincerely, the perfect life. I have the perfect life except for one thing. It's a big thing. We often think we are in complete control, or we try. And it's, look, working hard and doing all the right things. We do mitigate a lot of risk. Having resources, access to medical care mitigates a lot of risk. It doesn't matter. I mean, it could have been Jeff Bezos' child and we've had the same outcome. There's a vulnerability that comes with this. And I don't say that to scare people. I say that so hopefully people realize this is important. And we've taken historically a trickle-down approach to cancer research. We see what works for adults. If it does work for adults, we give it a chance in kids. We use the 5-year survival rate as a metric. Well, the average age of diagnosis for an adult is in the mid-60s. Mm-hmm. 5-year survival, if you get somebody from 65 to 70, surely you'd like to live a little longer, but you've given some meaningful time and you've lived a meaningful part of life. Yeah. The average age of diagnosis for a child is 9 or 10 years old. The goal is not to get you to 14 to 15. And I often explain, there's a data point out there that says when we lose a child to cancer, we lose approximately 65 to 70 years of life. Where it's an adult, it's 10 to 15 years of life. That doesn't tell the story enough. For me, it is, in Sebastian's case, and I share those people, I'll be 55 this year. I have one bucket list item left in my life, and that's to be a grandfather. I'm not in a hurry for it. But I would like to be a grandfather at some point. That would be cool. Yes. But, I got to graduate from high school. I got to go to college. I married my high school sweetheart. We bought a home together, had success, professional success, moved around, did things, had children, took trips together, all these things that shape who we are. Children don't get any of these things. Like I said, if I died tomorrow, that's the only thing left. We need to develop drugs that are geared towards long-term survivability. And that's going to take a lot of resources and a lot of effort and a different way of thinking to bring about that change.
And how have you seen throughout the last 10 years, how have you seen the medical resources in research develop? Have you seen a large increase in development, or do you feel with the funding beyond the funding that you've raised, with the funding that the government is currently providing and other organizations, do you feel that the research is increasing?
It had been. These cuts to the NIH are going to be significant. I still am optimistic because I think some of the things that have happened over the past 10 years, we've gotten a much better understanding of the immunotherapy, of the immune system, and harnessing, because traditionally chemotherapy, what it is using drugs to kill fast-growing cells, or to kill cells, because cancer is just cells growing out of control.
Yes.
Chemotherapy is indiscriminate. It kills good cells, bad cells, and that's why we have some of the dramatic changes. And in Sebastian's case, going through puberty made it even more challenging, because it's going through puberty while you have cancer is like putting gasoline on a fire. It exacerbates it. So I think understanding everyone's immune system, and I think we're getting there, where the term used a lot is precision therapy. And one of the ways I try to explain it to people that people have a difficult time understanding is, we all know during COVID, we know of someone, or our family knows of someone who looked like they were in great health, didn't have a lot of the risk factors, but unfortunately succumbed to COVID. And then we also know people who are on the other side of that spectrum, smoke, drink, heavily overweight, and were asymptomatic when they were diagnosed. And the reason being is simply because we respond differently to different stimuli.
Yes.
And cancer, you've had two people who are diagnosed with the same staging, the same kind of cancer, you have two very different outcomes. So the personalized medicine and understanding the immune system, the targets, the genetic makeup of, that's why genetic testing has become more molecular testing. There's all these deeper tests to understand not just you have a tumor, but what is that tumor? What's in that tumor? And what are the similarities in that tumor that may exist in other unrelated cancers where we've had successful treatment? So that combined with AI, and AI is not going to be it's not going to be a silver bullet, because a lot of it is data, and data sharing is a challenge in the medical community because of privacy requirements. But
yes.
I do think that one of the things we'll be able to do, particularly with small population size disease, is use AI to do analysis that would never be able to be done. So I'm hopeful and optimistic that some of these things are going to bring about change at a much faster pace.
Yeah, it's incredible how the introduction of AI over the last few years has completely changed the game, not only in terms of medicine, but every single industry. It's incredible. And so, to go off of what you were talking about, the immune system, do you think that with the research that you've seen, the environment that we have created with processed foods, etc., do you think that is impacting children more heavily?
Certainly we have to do a better job with our food supply.
Yes.
What I understand from the doctors is very often childhood cancer is not typically a function of the food supply, just because they haven't lived long enough.
Yes.
A 4-year-old has not eaten enough processed food, generally speaking, to be impacted. But we certainly need to do a better job with our food supply. And I think as adults, you definitely see, people who either eat too much red meat, that's a higher risk factor. Smoke, drink, these are all higher risk factors that if you live long enough, can increase the likelihood of you having cancer. At the childhood level, it's less. I'm not saying it's impossible, but there's no comprehensive studies that say definitively that it's the food supply, but we do need cleaner food.
I completely agree. I think also just with the rise, food allergies don't even compare to cancer.
Right.
But with the rise of the amounts of food allergies that we are seeing now too, it's definitely showing that our immune systems are just becoming more and more compromised. Dolphins Cancer Challenge. Dolphins Cancer Challenge has been a monumental part of Sebastian Strong, and you are associated with the organization as well. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yes, Sebastian was treated at the University of Miami. Alex's place is the childhood cancer clinic, and the Dolphins have had a long-term relationship through their Dolphins Cancer Challenge event with the University of Miami Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. So when Sebastian was diagnosed, I think we did our first event with them. It was February of 2016. It's a 5K, and he did the 5K. I did a 100-mile ride. We had friends and family all participate at different levels, and we raised, I think it was $80,000 for Sylvester, which was fantastic. And they've been amazing. Those people, many of them are good friends at the University of Miami. So that was the first event. And then through the years, what we ended up doing, they had some changes in leadership, but ended up with someone who I knew from before, a gentleman by the name of Javi Sanchez, who is their executive director. He and I worked together because I said, look, I want to do more for pediatrics above all. And Javi said, okay, let me see how we can do this. And we crafted a program specifically for that would allow us to focus our efforts exclusively on childhood cancer. And through that effort, we agreed to fund an endowed chair for pediatric cancer research at the University of Miami, which is a significant investment and commitment for not just by us, but by UM and the Dolphins to, in my hopes, to continue to build the efforts here at the University of Miami on the pediatric side to match their prowess on the adult side. But they've been great partners and allowed for us to create a lot more awareness around childhood cancer.
What an incredible organization. I've seen, obviously I go to the University of Miami, and I've seen a lot of advocacy through that, but I would love to volunteer and get involved because I think it's, and with Sebastian Strong as well too. I think it's an incredible organization. And so to finish off today, what would be your message to parents and families who are going through these same struggles that you have endured? What would you say to them, and what advice would you give them?
You're not alone. There are others out there to support you. Your medical team is there to help you through this very difficult journey. And there are organizations like Sebastian Strong. You know, it's not part of my formal offering, but what's ended up happening over the past 7-8 years is I get the call saying, hey, would you, someone was just diagnosed or someone just lost a child. Would you be willing to talk to them? And the answer is yes. It's part of my therapy as well, to be able to help others. It's part of the way I honor Sebs and part of the way I take care of myself, because it can be very lonely when you're going through this, because people, it's one of the biggest challenges that come with, in our case, losing a child. People don't ask about him anymore. They ask about your other two boys, and it's just because there's a weird social, again, that's part of what the tattoos are for. So I always joke, well, in case I forget, I've memorialized it on my arm. But the biggest thing is these families are not alone, that there are others out there. There are other wonderful foundations in our community and throughout the country who are there to help. And hopefully those of us that are focused on research, and those incredible researchers and folks on the front line looking for better treatments are getting closer and closer every day, so that the ultimate goal is that childhood cancer can become a chronic, manageable disease. Today there is not a cure for AIDS, but there are treatment options or treatments that will let you live a full life. I would love to see that happen with cancer, I'm not a scientist. I can't fess up, but I hope that we can get to a point that we can make it manageable.
I think that you are making a monumental impact on countless lives. And I think that your son would be so proud of the legacy that you are leaving behind, not only for him, but for yourself as well and for your family. And we wish you the best of luck with everything that you do. And you have our full support here at the Hale Foundation. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm tearing. It was so amazing to hear your story and talk to you, and we hope to have you again here soon. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it, and appreciate all you guys do.
Thank you.